Have you ever noticed that some people don't fight back, yet everyone who hurts them somehow ends up losing? Not immediately, not loudly, but slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. This is not coincidence. And it's definitely not karma in the way most people understand it. Because when it comes to Gemini, the universe doesn't rush. It observes. Gemini is ruled by air. Invisible, intangible, underestimated. You can't grab it, you can't trap it, and the moment you think you've controlled it, it's already gone. That's the first mistake people make with a Gemini. They confuse silence with weakness, detachment with indifference, adaptability with inconsistency. But what they don't realize is this. Gemini sees everything. The Gemini mind is always collecting data, words, tone, intentions, energy. Even when a Gemini smiles, even when they walk away, even when they say nothing, something is being registered. And the moment you cross a line, something shifts, not in Gemini, but in the universe around them. You see, Gemini doesn't need revenge. They don't need confrontation. They don't need to prove anything. Because Gemini operates through awareness. And awareness is dangerous. When someone hurts a Gemini, they are not just hurting a person, they are disrupting a delicate energetic balance. Gemini carries duality. Light and shadow, logic and intuition, presence and distance. This dual nature acts like a mirror. Whatever you project onto a Gemini doesn't stay there, it reflects back into your life. That's when things begin to unravel. Opportunities disappear. Connections weaken. Clarity fades. And no one ever connects it to that Gemini they underestimated. During Gemini season, this effect becomes even stronger. The air thickens with truth. Conversations reveal intentions. Masks slip. And those who acted carelessly toward a Gemini start feeling a strange resistance, as if the universe itself is quietly rearranging their path. This is why hurting a Gemini feels harmless at first. There's no explosion, no dramatic reaction, no instant punishment. Just silence. But silence in Gemini energy is not emptiness. It's movement without sound. So before you dismiss a Gemini as too emotional, too changeable, or too detached, understand this. Gemini doesn't chase. Gemini releases. And when they release, the universe steps in. Because some signs fight back. Some signs forgive. But Gemini triggers a response far greater than themselves. Stay until the end of this video, because the fifth reason reveals something most people never see. And once you understand it, you'll never look at a Gemini the same way again. Have you ever noticed that hurting certain people never ends well, even when they don't fight back? Have you ever felt that there are people different? Rare. Deeply misunderstood. Silently powerful. If you've ever been close to a Gemini, this might feel personal. Because Gemini is one of the most underestimated and misinterpreted signs of the zodiac, and that mistake always comes at a price. To some, Gemini seems unstable. To others, unpredictable. To many, emotionally distant. But here's the contradiction almost no one notices. What looks like confusion is perception. What looks like coldness is awareness. And what they call too much is simply a mind operating on multiple levels at the same time. Gemini is not shallow. Gemini is deep. In this video, you'll discover 5 powerful reasons why you should never hurt a Gemini, not because they will seek revenge, but because the universe responds on their behalf. Each reason goes beyond astrology. Here we talk about psychology, energy, and cause and effect, things many people only understand when it's already too late. Stay until the end, because the reasons go deeper. And the last one explains why the punishment is never loud but always precise. Before we continue, if this is already making sense to you, whether you're a Gemini or someone who lives with one, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. that helps this message reach those who truly need to hear it. Now, let's begin with the reasons. Gemini sees what others do not see. Gemini notices things before they happen. Not because they try to predict the future, but because they perceive patterns invisible to most people. While many hear only words, Gemini hears pauses. While others observe actions, Gemini analyzes intentions. There is a silent reading happening constantly inside the Gemini mind, a continuous collection of information that goes far beyond the obvious. This happens because Gemini is ruled by the element of air. Air is not seen, but it is felt. It infiltrates, circulates, connects dots that seem unrelated. That's how the Gemini mind works. Fast, associative, curious, and deeply attentive to the emotional environment. When someone hurts a Gemini, they almost never notice the exact moment it was registered. There is no immediate reaction, no emotional explosion, sometimes not even a visible change in behavior. But internally, something has been understood with absolute clarity. Gemini understands the why behind the action, not just the action itself. They perceive whether there was intention, carelessness, manipulation, or disrespect. And that understanding changes everything because from that moment on, Gemini adjusts their presence. This is where many people get it wrong. They think that because Gemini keeps talking, laughing, or acting normally, nothing happened. But what actually happened was an internal reorganization. Gemini doesn't confront in the heat of the moment because they need to understand the full picture. They observe how the person behaves afterward, which patterns repeat, which truths reveal themselves over time. This is the gift. The ability to see beyond the surface, to read between the lines, to catch subtle inconsistencies that go unnoticed by others. But every gift has a cost. Because they see too much, Gemini often carries information they cannot share. They perceive things that, if spoken out loud, would cause conflict, denial, or chaos. So they stay silent. And that silence is not weakness, it's processing. The challenge is that this hyper-awareness can generate anxiety, overthinking, and emotional exhaustion. Gemini feels deeply because they understand deeply. They are hurt not only by what happened, but by what was perceived behind what happened. That's why when someone hurts a Gemini thinking it went unnoticed, they are making a serious mistake. Nothing went unnoticed. Everything was seen. Everything was understood. And from that moment on, the relationship is never the same. Not out of revenge, but because Gemini adjusts the level of access the other person has to their life. Seeing what others cannot see is the first reason you should never underestimate a Gemini. Because when they realize who you truly are, the universe already begins to reorganize itself around that truth. Gemini lets go instead of retaliating. When someone hurts a Gemini, the expected reaction would be confrontation, explanations, demands, or even revenge. But Gemini rarely follows that path. They let go. And this deeply confuses the person on the other side because we were taught to believe that strength is proven through conflict. For Gemini, strength is proven through the ability not to remain where the energy has already been broken. Gemini understands something many people take a lifetime to learn. Not every battle deserves a response. Some deserve only distance. And that distance doesn't come from pride. It comes from clarity. After realizing what happened, intention, pattern, and repetition, Gemini makes a silent move. They reduce their investment, limit access, adjust proximity. There are no dramatic announcements, no long speeches, just a presence that is no longer the same. This is where misinterpretation happens. The one who caused the harm assumes it wasn't that serious. After all, Gemini remained polite, rational, functional. But internally, the decision has already been made. It is no longer worth investing energy there. Letting go for Gemini is not giving up. It is preserving. Preserving the mind, time, curiosity, and lightness. Gemini knows that insisting on misaligned connections comes at too high a cost. So they step away before where turns into resentment. And there is something profoundly powerful about that. When Gemini lets go, they don't carry active resentment. They don't ruminate on revenge. They simply withdraw their energy from the field. And when that energy leaves, the balance shifts. People who are accustomed to Gemini's presence, the conversation, the stimulation, the exchange, begin to feel a void that's hard to explain. Something no longer flows. The environment loses its lightness. Communication gets stuck. And no one connects this to the moment Gemini chose to step back. But that was where everything began. The gift of this trait is emotional adaptability. Gemini can move forward without being trapped in the past. They understand that life is movement, and staying where there is no reciprocity goes against their very nature. The challenge is that letting go too quickly can make Gemini seem cold or indifferent. More intense personalities mistake detachment for lack of feeling. But the truth is different. Gemini feels deeply. They simply choose not to destroy themselves because of it. That's why hurting a Gemini is dangerous, not because of what they do, but because of what they stop doing.
They stop insisting.
They stop explaining. They stop being available. And when Gemini lets go, they don't slam doors in anger. They simply walk in another direction. And it's in that moment that the universe begins to respond, adjusting paths, removing what no longer vibrates at the same frequency. Because letting go for Gemini is not loss. It is alignment. Gemini functions as a mirror. Gemini does not absorb energy, they reflect it. And this is one of the most dangerous truths for those who engage with this sign without awareness. Because of their natural duality, Gemini functions as a living mirror. They don't impose a fixed identity or arrive carrying a rigid version of themselves. Instead, they adjust to the environment, the conversation, the other person's vibration. And that is exactly where the reflection occurs. When you arrive with lightness, Gemini returns lightness. When you arrive with curiosity, they amplify it. But when you arrive with manipulation, irony, disrespect, or emotional games, Gemini does not hold that inside. They return it to the field. And this doesn't happen immediately or explicitly. The reflection doesn't come as confrontation, accusation, or revenge. It comes as a reorganized reality. Situations begin to respond to what was projected. Many people get confused because they expect the mirror to be direct behavior. But Gemini's mirror is energetic and psychological. It reveals who you are, not to Gemini, but to the world around you. This happens because Gemini detects inconsistencies very quickly. They notice when words don't match actions, when promises don't hold, when intentions are masked. Once they see this, they adjust internally and allow the person to live with their own projection. That's when the effects begin. Those who tried to manipulate a Gemini start dealing with confusing environments. Those who lied begin to be questioned more often. Those who are cruel start encountering resistance, delays, and noise in their own communication. None of this seems connected to Gemini. And that's the most intriguing part. The gift of this trait is relational awareness. Gemini teaches, without teaching, that everything we emit returns. They don't need to point out the mistake. They allow the other to see it. The challenge is that this mirror role can be lonely. Gemini often perceives truths that no one is ready to admit. They see the shadows, but they don't force anyone to face them. This can create emotional distance and a sense of not belonging. But there is a greater reason for this. Gemini is not here to carry what isn't theirs. They were not made to absorb other people's emotional disorder. Their role is to reflect, clarify, and move. That's why hurting a Gemini activates this mirror. You don't face Gemini. You face the amplified version of what you projected yourself. And when that reflection begins to act in the world, there's no way to pretend it was coincidence. Gemini does not punish. They reveal. And sometimes, revelation is the most uncomfortable experience of all. Gemini triggers invisible changes. The consequences of hurting a Gemini are almost never immediate. They don't come as arguments, sudden losses, or dramatic events. They come as silent adjustments in reality. And that's why so few people make the connection. When Gemini emotionally withdraws, something shifts in the field around them. Not because they wish it to, but because their energy no longer sustains certain dynamics. Gemini is communication, flow, connection. When they leave, the flow changes. At first, everything seems the same. Routines continue.
People move on.
But small frictions begin to appear. Conversations that once flowed start to stall. Invitations stop coming. Ideas no longer move forward with the same clarity. None of this is alarming enough to raise concern, and that's exactly why it's so effective. Gemini triggers invisible changes because their presence operates behind the scenes. They connect people, translate intentions, soften friction. When that function disappears, systems begin to reveal flaws that were previously being compensated for. It's like removing air from a room. You can't see it, but everything begins to feel heavier. Those who hurt a Gemini usually believe that nothing happened. And that's the most dangerous part. Because while there's no visible reaction, the reorganization is already underway. The universe responds to alignment, not confrontation. And when Gemini becomes misaligned with someone, life begins to redistribute paths. The gift of this process is energetic sensitivity. Gemini senses when a space is no longer fertile and withdraws before stagnation turns into suffering. They trust the natural movement of things. The challenge is that these changes affect them too. Gemini feels when environments shift, when relationships dissolve, when connections become superficial. They are not untouched by it. They simply don't dramatize it. But there is something essential here. Gemini does not create chaos. They reveal the imbalance that already existed. When opportunities disappear after a Gemini withdraws, it's not punishment, it's coherence. When connections weaken, it's not bad luck, it's lack of support. Hurting a Gemini is removing a key element from the equation. And the system, without that element, must readjust. That's why the consequences seem random. That's why no one points fingers. That's why everything happens in silence. Gemini doesn't need to announce anything. Absence does the work. And when you realize something essential has changed, there's no way back to the starting point. Because invisible changes are the deepest ones. And once they begin, they don't ask for permission. Reason 5. Gemini's silence is not empty. When Gemini goes silent, many people believe it's over. That they lost interest. That they moved on without feeling anything. That is the greatest illusion. Gemini's silence is not absence. It is a decision. It's not avoidance. It's internal repositioning. It's not emptiness. It's movement without noise. Gemini speaks when they believe there is exchange. They explain when they feel they will be heard. They debate when they sense openness. But the moment they realize that any word would become wasted energy, they fall silent. And this silence doesn't arise from impulse. It is born after observation, analysis, and confirmation of patterns. When Gemini goes quiet, they have already seen enough. This is the most definitive moment. Because while other signs break with anger, Gemini breaks with clarity. They don't seek external closure because the closure has already happened internally. There is no need for a final conversation, long explanations, or emotional justifications. What exists is clarity. Gemini's silence reorganizes paths. People begin to sense that something has changed, but they can't name what. Communication loses vitality. Exchange becomes mechanical. The presence that once stimulated, provoked, and illuminated is simply no longer there. And that weighs heavily. The gift of this silence is inner power. Gemini learns early that not every truth needs to be spoken to be valid. Some truths only need to be respected internally. The challenge is emotional solitude. By going silent, Gemini protects their mind, but also distances themselves. They carry deep understandings that will not be shared, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Hurting a Gemini and triggering this silence means crossing an invisible boundary. From that point on, access changes. There is no hostility, but there is no return to the previous state either. And this is where the universe steps in. Because Gemini's silence creates space. And the universe always fills space. It fills it with consequences, adjustments, and realignments. Not as punishment, but as a natural response to what has been closed. Gemini doesn't need to explain themselves. They don't need to justify. They don't need to react. The silence does all of that for them. That's why the final reason is the most important one. When Gemini goes silent, it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of the lesson. And that lesson doesn't come in words. It comes in experiences. Each reason goes deeper because Gemini doesn't live on the surface. The more you understand, the more you realize this isn't just astrology, it's consciousness in action. Gemini does not punish. They align. If there is one essential thing to remember, it is this. Gemini's greatest flaw, duality, is actually their greatest power. They don't retaliate. They let go. And when they let go, the universe speaks for them. Before closing, I want to sincerely thank you for staying until the end and receiving this message with attention. None of this is by chance. If this content spoke to you, it's because it was meant for you to hear. Now, so I know this message truly reached you, confirm receipt by writing the number 0505 in the comments. This number is a sign of alignment, awareness, and connection with this message. And if you feel this kind of content resonates with your journey, join us. Subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell so you don't miss any important messages, like this video, and share it with someone you feel needs to hear this too. When you do that, you don't just strengthen the channel, you help this message reach exactly who needs it at the right time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And until the next message.